very good evening to you and welcome to this evening's edition of Politics 101. We seem to be having all kinds of problems, as some of you may know. They have been interfering with CAMS TV, and we, of course, broadcast from CAMS TV. So those of you who are accustomed to joining us via CAMS TV, please try to see if you can join us from Politics 101 or on YouTube, because they're messing with the CAMS TV platform. Welcome to the program, however, wherever you're joining us from, whether it's in Guyana or the wider Caribbean, or you're out in North America, or in Europe. Lots of you join us from Europe. Tonight, of course, we are going to get behind the news. Our usual guests, Dr. Henry Jeffrey and G.H.K. Lal, who are our guests tonight, and we will be looking at some of the issues in the news. Of course, you know that the DPP is again. This time, the DPP has asked for a magistrate to recuse herself from a case. There's no conflict of interest, but she has asked for the magistrate to recuse himself from the case because there was a special prosecutor. The magistrate was asking for evidence to refuse to give evidence, and the magistrate used her prerogative, and the DPP promptly stepped in and wrote to the chancellor and asked for the chancellor to remove the magistrate from the case. Of course, this is part of the Dion Bascom case, and you know that case has a lot of legs, we may say. Yes, yes, that case seemed to have picked up a lot of legs, and so we're going to be talking about that. Aubrey Norton, the opposition leader, PNC leader, was abroad. He was in Canada and the United States, but he has made an interesting call, and he has called for consensus whenever there are big projects. I think I was on a program. I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh, it was a University of West Indies program on the role of the opposition. And this question came that when their big projects came up, I think it was from the leader of the Democratic Labour Party who was on the panel. And he was making this very proposal that when it comes to big issues, big money bills, that there should be consensus among or between the two parties, or there should be a supermajority. And I remember Miss Joan Messiah, one of the leaders, or the leader of one of the parties in Antigua, saying that she doesn't agree with it because it would handcuff the government, and she doesn't believe. But Norton has made that bold proposal, and we're going to talk to Dr. Jeffrey and Mr. Lal about that issue. And then, of course, the Gas to Show project is back in the news. It's back in the news. It never seems to go away. There are strong positions for it, strong positions against it, all kinds of issues. And we're going to talk to our guests about that tonight. So please, if you can share the link, we are not going to be broadcasting tonight from AMS TV because, of course, there are some issues of hijacking, I think, of CAMS TV site. So we are broadcasting tonight from Politics 101, and of course we are going to be on YouTube. And I recently found out that we have quite a following on YouTube, and I wasn't aware because we pay so much attention to Facebook and not on YouTube. So please spread the word. Please spread the word so that we can have our usual discussion tonight. So let me bring in our guest because we have lost about 20 minutes already. GHK, Gabriel, and Dr. Jeffrey. Good evening to you, brothers.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Yeah. Dr. Jeffrey, let me go straight to the issue. The suggestion by Mr. Norton, and I know that's in your alley, as they would say, because you've been quite forthright and consistent on the issue of shared governance. What do you make of Norton's suggestion?
Well, let me say this, that there is absolutely nothing wrong. Of course, it would require some kind of constitutional change and all that sort of a thing. With making suggestions that there should be supermajority or consensus on various issues, you have to have more than consensus. You have to have agreement. It depends on what you mean by consensus in that context. Because consensus can mean I do not agree with you, but given it's your thing to do it, you may proceed. But I do not agree that I actually don't agree, but you may proceed. So you have a sort of green light to proceed, although I do not agree with you. That could be a form of consensus. But there are numerous ways to do that. You still have to go to, of course, some kind of constitutional reform to do those things. But let me say from the very beginning that there are only two forms of government, recognized forms of democracy in this world. One is a majoritarian, and the other one is consensual. It's as simple as that. The notion that there is no democracy that's consensual. So I woke up this morning hearing a government minister saying, consensusism. Then you got to look at Belgium, you got to look at Switzerland, we got to look at Northern Ireland. There are numerous places that consensus is important before decisions are made. There are even notions of that you must have agreement according to ethnic lines, that people can vote according to that, regardless of which party they are in. So this can be done. But let me point out that as I said, there are two forms of recognized forms of democracy. When Americans came out the other day, the State Department, and say, get rid of the winner-take-all system and create an effective democratic system. What they are telling, if you got to get rid of the winner-takes-all, you got to go to a consensual form of democracy. It's for you to work out what precisely that form is. And this is nothing new. This is nothing new. If you remember ANOG, the party I was associated with. If you go, if you go into most of its documents, the leaflet, it is spread about. It says it's intention is to create a consensual democracy in Guyana. That was its motive. So what Mr. Norton said can be done in numerous ways. It can be done in a way that means that every important project, but that has its own problems. You'll have to define what is an important project and all of that. It can be done in a holistic kind of a way that we have a consensual government in Guyana, such as you have in Switzerland, such as you have in Northern Ireland, such as you have in Belgium. Belgium don't even have what I would call a national non-ethnic political party. It does not have of any substance. These parties operate on the Walloon side and the French side, and then they come together and form the government of Belgium. So all kind of things can be done. So there's nothing wrong, and there is nothing contradictory. Indeed, as I said in the beginning, that there are only two forms of recognized forms of what we may call liberal democracy in this world. One is majoritarian. It has not worked in Guyana. The other one is consensual. You may determine what you want in terms, and Mr. Norton may have to define further what he means.
In the context of the heightened politics in Guyana, whatever people are saying and trying to do, really, we are almost at boiling point. Do you, well, put in context, from your standpoint, Norton's suggestion?
Good evening, everyone, again. I think it's a bold initiative. I like the spirit behind it. I think it's more than an overture. I see it as a bold initiative, and I commend the opposition leader for taking this step and putting it on the table. Look, I hear Dr. Jeffrey and what could be, and I am saying that if the president is really serious and he's really authentic about wanting to be inclusive, wanting to be transparent, wanting to be accountable, and wanting to get some of that elusive unity, a start has to be made somewhere. And my take is that big projects, which are always subject to heaps of controversy, are a good place. It's about who gets, who doesn't get, who qualifies and who shouldn't have qualified. And I think that the 4I principle, 8I principle of the opposition having a role here, a contributory role, a part of a consensus in terms of these big projects. Yes, indeed, they have to be defined. And I think that could be driven by the size of the project. It's not going to be every run of the mill bridge and well placed in this community or the other. I think it's gonna have to feature things like how equitable it is, how national it is in scope and reach, and what kind of money are we talking about here? Look, at the end of the day, whether the project succeeds or fails, it doesn't matter who voted for whom or who lost and who won. All of us have to pay that debt. Every single Guyanese taxpayer have to pay that debt, and it makes good sense. It may not be real politics, but it makes for good politics, and it makes for good sense for the greater number of people, as represented by their elected ones, to have a say and to be in the midst of how these projects are determined. In other words, we have a tender board where, to be frank and to be polite, there there are many thoughts of its being compromised. So the output, the outcomes in terms of who receive awards, tender awards for big projects, have raised a lot of eyebrows in terms of qualifications, of skills, of expertise, experience, and all of that. So I say if we have more people, and certainly the opposition can bring a lot of people who know how these things work, and to add some credibility to the process, that comes from having consensus. That comes from having that practical hands-on involvement. It doesn't have to be in the nitty-gritty. It doesn't have to be on everything. And he was very careful. He said, on the big projects, look, conversation leads to consensus, which leads to collaboration, which leads to cooperation. And I think we've been missing all of those ingredients. Our government and opposition is talking through the media. They're talking around one another and over one another. I see the opposition leader Norton, and I commend him for speaking directly to the government and appealing to it, reaching out to it and say, we can lend a hand here towards, so let there be consensus. Let there be, he's not begging for anything. Let's get that clear. But he's saying, let us be involved. We are willing to be involved. We are open to contributing. And let there be some listening to that, because we feel that we'll put an end to a lot of these post project, post tender, post result discussions that never seem to end and seem to drag us into a deeper political and racial mire. That's where I stand on this.
While I have you here, Gabriel, and I think your response include part of what I'm going to ask you. Why is it in a country like Guyana? Is it important that when you come to big projects that it is better to have consensus than not to have it?
I'm sorry again. Could you? It's better to have
No,
what?
I was saying why is it important? Why is it better to have consensus on big projects?
Well,
Why is it better to have consensus rather than not have it when it comes to big projects?
well, if we don't have consensus, the nature of our society and the history of our society and the passions and prejudices, they all feed into second guessing. They all they fuel the oral and other conflicts that seem to reflexively flow. But if we all have a stake, it comes back to this thing. Our hands are in the dough. Our our eyes are part of the process. I think that this would help to diffuse, well, at least I hope that it does. It helps to diffuse some of the tensions and the disputes that never seem to end and seem to automatically spring up after these big projects are decided upon, whilst they are worked upon and when they're done. We are waiting to find fault then, one way or another.
Yeah.
If the PNC government is in place, the PPP observers are waiting for that. If the PPP is in power as it is now, and there are these big projects and we have them up the wazoo, then there is this waiting to say, what are they up to now? So you have this involvement, which is the start of the consensus. There's going to be disagreement. I think that takes away some of those kinds of conversations.
Could it Henry, you're about to say something?
Yeah, let me tell you, David, the basic problem with our society is that there is no public opinion.
Mm-hmm.
In other countries, you have public, well, in homogeneous Barbados, Jamaica, you have a public opinion that can affect the government. Most of the things you are saying we're going to talk about here wouldn't lose the PPP any particularly support from their normal supporters. But if it was in a place like Barbados or Jamaica, where you have more or less an homogeneous situation, you have a public opinion that the government needs to listen to. The government here don't have to listen to any public opinion. They don't have one. I'm talking about any government. The same thing for the other government. Therefore, the problem you face is there is no public opinion. When you say we must hold the government accountable, there is no way for you to hold the government politically accountable if there's no public opinion. And if the PPP can win, so the PPP win by 1 seat, or the PNC win by 1 or 2 seats. What's that? How is that? How does that drive national unity in a country ethnically divided as we are, almost equally? So effectively, that's why you are saying this, but it wouldn't. Mr. Norton's position would not solve the problem of inclusiveness, because you can be uninclusive in a lot of other things that you might, as a government, might not even bring things to the fore that you can call inclusive or big projects. The issue is that you don't have a public opinion, and in a way to check you when you're government, one or the other, when you are doing things, you have to meet the other party on the other side. So whether or not he wants it on big projects, it will come down to an election. He will blame them for small project, and big quarrel will come up right there. So effectively, that is the issue, and it would only be solved when those two people are sitting at the table, as other countries have proven, and making the decisions that affect this country, all the decisions. But as I said, Mr. Norton may proceed with the big projects idea and all of that. But Guyana, it would not solve the problem. The problem would remain. The ethnic problem will still be there, because it's not a question of big projects, it's a question of all projects.
Yeah. But isn't it possibly a first step in a very difficult...
All right, I said it. I am not quarreling with it. I am saying, yes, it's a first step. But remember, it's a first step with a notion that I can rule this country without you. If I win by my 1 seat or 2 seat, I can rule this country more or less without you. Only what we're gonna agree to be big projects I gotta talk to you about. Now, I am not certain that I am certain, as a matter of fact, and never work anywhere else, that will solve Guyana's ethnic problem. Because when competitive elections start, I'm going to go back right down there and tell those people a lot of nasty things about you, and you gotta do the same thing about me.
Let me ask you this, Dr. And then I'll go back with a specific question to Gabriel. I mentioned that I was on a webinar by the University of the West Indies, and they had some of these politicians there, Reverend Afili, who had left the Barbados Party and became the one-man opposition after they had gotten the third. He was on. The new leader of the DLP was on. He's a lecturer at the university. You had somebody from St. Lucia, and Joan Messiah, who's the leader of a small party, quote-unquote small party in Antigua. And the DLP leaders suggested this as a way of democratizing Caribbean democracy. And the others disagreed with him. They thought it would handcuff government. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, of course. Of course. You mustn't include Guyana in Caribbean democracy. Guyana is a different case. These people are homogeneous societies. 90% are Black people. So effective Afro-Guyanese and so on, and 80-something% and so on. So there is no big quarrel about race existing there as such. Yes, you would enhance, no doubt. In that context, you got to put it. in that context, it might well enhance, particularly if you have a dominant party for one reason or another, some being in office for nearly 20 years and all that. And therefore, there is a minority out there that feels, but remember, this is not an ethnic situation. This is a thing, because ethnic situation flares up and it leads to other kind of dimension and discourse. It leads to this a national unity and all that does not exist. And so I will say to you, it's a different situation. Yes, it may well help in that situation where you can say, yeah, the man outside, but he can always get that, he got to look in, but here it's not going to help. That look in, for instance, if I was in a competitive situation in Guyana and you come to me with, and that was the constitutional agreement, I will say, well, listen, boss, it will happen. You'll say, come and speak to me about these are what we define as a large projects. I'll say, yeah, come in and speak to you. And there, if it's totally important, and I believe totally important to government, I say, all right, that's fine. We going along. Or if you made enough concession. If you do not, I will say no, or I will say, go on, I don't agree, but I would not object. So I leave you to go down the road. That's a kind of consensus. Nobody gets up and say, I disagree. You just almost say, stay quiet and says, all right, you go on. You made the decision and go on. I agree that you can make the decision. I don't agree with the decision, but you may well go on with it. The Parliament of Guyana, the second reading is a reading of principle, right? The principle of what you want to do. The third reading is supposed to be a committee stage kind of a reading. And that third reading is supposed to be done so that although we disagree with the principle of what you are doing, we can sit down and try, given that you are the government, we can sit down together and try to come up with the less destructive, at least from the opposition standpoint, the less destructive aspects of this. We can mitigate the destructive aspects and we can come up with a bill that, more or less bring us together. That's the third reading all about, committee stage. But here, you don't even have that. Jagan had once said that any bill more than 6 pages should go to committee stage. You had agreed to that. No. Now you have a situation, bills 100 pages and you want to do it the same day. And, so you have that kind of situation. So these are complicated issues. You need real experts to tell you about them. I only dabble in these things. But the truth is that what Mr. Norton is speaking to might be a first step of a sort, but it will not solve the problem of ethnic rivalry in a competitive democratic situation.
Yeah. Gabriel, same question to you, but I also want you to address the question of corruption. That if we were to have the two parties having by law to agree when it comes to large projects, could it a kind of decrease corruption or the potential for corruption? I want you to address that, and also the question that I asked.
Well, before I answer that, I'd like to pick up on continue where Dr. Jeffrey was. We have, in effect, 70% of the population not communicating with each other. In essence, for all intents and purposes, not having anything to do with each other than routine intercourse, which they can't avoid. So if we have that 70% and taking the reality of Guyana into play, that's almost all of us not really tolerating each other. I hear him, and it goes back to what he has said before about dominance, total control. Nobody wants to give up anything, but I prefer to look upon it as a first step. despite our ethnically riddled society and enraged society. In terms, so I think it's a first step, and I don't know where this can go. Would the PPP be receptive? I think that's doubtful. But at least Mr. Norton has gone public and said, look, I have my hand stretched out and I'm willing to participate in something to this effect. We'll flesh out the procedures if there's agreement that we can go from this conversation to the next step. And who knows where this can go to? We have not gotten anywhere. We are not speaking to anybody. And as Dr. Jeffrey said, I think we don't have a viable public opinion that makes what I say before. Where's this voice in this country that makes the PPP pause and say, well, hold a minute, we got to listen to this? I would have preferred to be the opposition leader, but I'm not so sure that it is currently. That brings them to a dead stop, big project or anything else. So I think in the context of where we are 2 years into this new government, the Americans calling for inclusive government, some of us pressing for that, the government not particularly listening. Let these things go on the record as having been uttered in sincerity, and let them shake out from there. In terms of your question, Dr. Hinds, about corruption and possible reduction in corruption, there are two answers to that. Let's say that there is some form, some degree, some level of consensus on big projects, however that is defined. You have one of two outcomes here. Everybody gets into the action and the corruption continues unchecked, meaning both the PPP and PNC participants, they share the wealth around between themselves, between their own people, their own contractors and the hangers on, or I prefer again to look on the brighter side and say, and I'm not laughing here, to look on the brighter side and say there is a bit of I'm hedging here, a bit of a check and balance with the four eyes that I talk about, the four eye principle coming into effect, where somebody is there and say, well, we need to not qualify this person. Look at it. I mean, this is obvious here. How can we go this way? And there may be some sort of embarrassment, there may be some sort of reluctance, or there may be some sort of somebody coming to their senses. Now I'm talking perhaps in a rational world. And I get the sense that Dr. Jeffrey may shake his head and say, look, we're living in an irrational society here, and irrationality prevails based on ethnicity and based on control. And there's a lot of credence to that. But having said that, I am still willing, being the eternal optimist, to say if the opposition is involved in big projects, who knows where it can lead to? And I think at the very least we can hope that there will be some disruption in the corruption supply chain, that there will be some minimizing, some reduction in it. Disruption and then reduction and hopefully minimization of it. Will it be elimination? Not in this country.
Not in this country. Let's turn our attention to the recent action by the DPP. There are arguments that this DPP is probably more politicized than the DPPs in our sister Caribbean countries for obvious reasons, as Dr. Jeffrey has pointed out. Dr. Jeffrey, were you surprised that he reacted so quickly and went so far as to ask for the magistrate removal from the case, given all the controversy around the office of the DPP and our previous, not in the so distant past, or previous actions? Are you surprised that she stuck her neck out and asked for the removal of the magistrate?
How would that hurt her?
Your question, of course, yes.
How would it hurt her?
Yeah,
It will
yeah, yeah.
not. How would it hurt the regime? It will not. And if the regime believes that they need to protect some people that belongs to them, they will do it because they have nothing to lose by doing it. It is as simple as that. I know that the DPP has this power, and what shocked me was she didn't even think it necessary to give clear some clear explanations as to why. I mean, the rules, more or less, from my understanding, and I am not a lawyer, but that once the evidence is there, and the evidence must have been there for somebody to determine that the case can go forward to the court. Once it's not destructive to public interest or something like that, and if it does not affect other cases, that are in the pipeline. But if that's the case, why can't she come out and say that? It seems to me we live in an era of consultation. I think it was Desiree Bernard writing in 1988 said public officials got to give the reasons for doing things. You cannot just do things without giving adequate reasons. And when you give your reasons, of course, giving reasons have a problem, because when you don't give, just say, oh, I'm doing this for this reason, I'm doing that for that reason, because the mark can take you to court on the reason you give. So when when a public official gives a reason, it got to be a substantial and well thought out reason, because the man standing out there would use that reason to take you to court for your action. And it's not Guyana, this is all over the world. So giving reason is just, people say, oh, you can give any old reason. You can't do it, because those same reasons will drag you to court. But that is what shocked me. I'm saying, all right, she has the power to do it. But why wouldn't you just come out and give people reasons for doing this? Reason for what you have done. And then to ask the magistrate to be recused. I think that that opens a whole ball game, different kinds of a ball game, because the question can arise, like, particularly in our country, when we just spoke to it, no public opinion. If I don't like where this case is going, if I'm government of either party, and I don't like what this thing is going, I can ask. I can just say, hey, stop this case and send this thing to David, or somebody. I mean, it's open a whole new different game on the ground in terms of justice and independence of the judiciary and all of that sort of thing. So those were my concerns around this issue. I gave it that she must have these powers, and no doubt she has them, but not to behave that when you finish doing this, you must give reasons, and these reasons must stand up to scrutiny, and scrutiny even in the courts of law. But you just can't do it and walk away in some sort of a... She says, as a matter of fact, that that's another thing. It does not appear that the judge has any personal interest in this matter. Yeah. She said so. And I said, okay, but where are we going with this then? I mean, what kind of interest she has? Tell us. I mean, and then I might run with you. I don't know.
And that's my question, Gabriel. Let me put that to you. I mean, the DPP says that the magistrate has no personal interest, no conflict of interest. So why remove her? Why? What is there something we're missing, Mr. Lal?
Well, that was the first thing that caught my eye. That Magistrate Daly we want to make clear, that's from the DPP's office, that the magistrate has no personal interest. So I'm saying that's a good acknowledgement. That's the beginning and end of it. If you had said the opposite, that it is clear that this magistrate has a personal interest, and therefore we are going to ask the chancellor to recuse her, or however this is done. Understood. But you come out and right from the get go, you put into the public domain, the magistrate does not have a personal interest. That's the end of the story. That's the end of the story. In my mind, there is no basis that you can now put out there, put before us to say, however, she still has to go. This opens the floodgates to a number of the one question in particular. What is the DPP's office up to? Is it a case of magistrate shopping? Is it looking around until it gets, or it already has in its head, some magistrate that is going to give it a guaranteed outcome in a case that is attracting the attention of this nation? Now, I will admit that the magistrate may have acted a bit heavy handed, a little bit untoward, and I'm being delicate here in with the police prosecutor, and him not presenting the evidence repeatedly, doing what he was told. But he works for the police. I think I have that right. He works for, so what is he going to produce? He can't produce what he doesn't have, or he cannot produce what his people are not giving him. So therefore, he is caught between a rock and a hard place here. So to send him to Coventry, as we were taught in our younger days, I mean, the guy wasn't put in jail. Thank God for that. But he was put in some holding area. That is humiliating enough as it is. I think that was a bit too much. But aside from that, this case, look at this case. Mr. Bascom comes out, Sergeant Bascom comes out and say ABC. And some big names in this country are involved. And I happen to be familiar with those names because of past experience, past public service work. And so there is one side pulling this way and another side pulling this way. We have this recording, which I think of the commissioner acting and the crime chief making themselves spectacle of themselves. Now we have this development with the police prosecutor, only to be followed within, was it 24, 48 hours, with the issue of the magistrate now and on her potential recusal looming. Where does this thing stop? Assistant Commissioner retired Paul Slow wrote about the dilemma facing Sergeant Bascom. I mean, every day seems to bring out a new episode of a political soap opera that is happening right now in the domain in the realm of jurisprudence. And we have got a situation that instead of comforting us that look, finally we are going to turn some pages and get to some substance in the Dion Bascom allegations as it relates to the Main Street murder. We are being the pages are we are reversing instead of advancing, instead of going probing deeper. I get the impression that curtains are being drawn and people are being removed. So what is the objective here, folks? What is the objective here of the DPP? What is it of the object? Where is this thing really going? What is wanted? Is it for an outcome that lambastes, that besmirches Sergeant Bascom, and that's the end of the story? I don't think the story can end just like that. I mean, there's so many balls up in the air, and all of them are loaded. All of them are spiked. And so the instance of the magistrate, the recusal being sought for this magistrate, and on the grounds, it certainly opens up all manner of conjecture as to what is going on in the DPP's head, the office of the people who come up with, okay, we've got to remove her because she's not good for business. And I think that anybody can read through where I'm going with this. If she has no personal interest, and let me close this out, If the magistrate has got no personal interest, in my mind, that's the end of the story. If she does have something beyond that, then we need to know. Then we need to know and say, here it is, it's substantive, and it speaks for itself. Since nothing is being said, where is this going to lead? We are waiting on the chancellor now.
We are waiting on the chancellor. Brothers, while we are on the courts and so forth, this item was not on our list to discuss this afternoon. No one is above the law, and so the magistrate did the right thing by holding the special prosecutor more accountable, given his view. To the court on this matter that we didn't have on our list. We had this spectacle yesterday of the government lawyers trying to get the court not to hold a speedy election petition trial. I said a spectacle. I'm not a lawyer, but I would imagine you would always want certain cases to be heard as swift as possible. To hear you have lawyers for one side of an election dispute, the side is claiming that it was the victim of an attempt to rig, trying to get the court not to have a speedy trial. Henry Jeffrey, am I naive? Am I going crazy? What's happening here?
David, he wasn't trying to get the court not to have a speedy trial. He was trying to get them not to have any trial. Throw it. Not to have any trial on the grounds that Mr. Ford could have raised this issue and be more proactive in getting it forward, even if the Chief Justice did not give a written report. He could have been more proactive and go to court, and all that might have been true. But still, these matters are of such importance. You realize, I think, is the representation of the People's Act that says these things should start, these election petitions should start, and should maybe something in about 21 days after the election, and not stop till they're completed. You believe this could happen in Kenya? The whole place would burn down 2 years after, and not this regime, it is all of them. They start these things, and it goes on for 2 years. They're behaving as if they are in a Westminster type parliamentary system, and you are going after, let me say, one parliamentarian in a constituency, but you are going after the whole government. You go after presidency here, and they do this kind of a thing. So, I mean, it's absurd. It's really absurd. These things should be heard as early as possible. In Kenya, how long it took? A month?
A month, yes, probably
yes.
About
a month. And
yeah.
from the thing, election to the court, the case is finished. That is what should happen. So no, I think this is a very important thing for the regime. The regime, the PNC during the election threw the regime under the bus, because I believe it's both of them doing this thing. But then the PNC caught them in thing and just threw them under the bus. I said, look what's and then they got caught clear. This is the clearest case of election manipulation, in my view, in Ghana's history.
Yeah.
We used to speculate. No, we got numbers. We 43 boxes with things in them and all that sort of a thing. It's the clearest case. Not to saying they are the only one we manipulate in election, but I'm saying because they got thrown under the bus, you had an election, a recount. On this specific case, I am hearing the discourse from the opposition side that's saying that the Amendment Act is unconstitutional and all that, because it almost gives the GCOM the right to make law. That might well be true.
Yeah.
But remember what the Chief Justice said to in a kind of, when she was giving the decision, she said that GCOM had the power by the means of that law to do everything possible to declare a fair and free election. That means when GCOM was confronted with these issues, they had the power to investigate and do all of that before they come to any decision about who won this election. Because of that very law that they are saying is so amazing that it almost gives GCOM the power to make law. And the reason GCOM was given that power was so that when difficulties arise during the election, it will deal with those difficulties. Don't sit down and say, I go to court for that. It's after you call the elections, you must go to court. After GCOM call the election and say, well, that is it. The election is won. The election is won by PNC, PPP, or whosoever, and they are annoyed with that. After you have done your internal investigation and so on, and make that decision, and then you go to court, and that's where the issue. GCOM reneged on its job during the election. It should have been, this election should be thrown out, not give to no PNC or PPP. This election, from the actual material on the ground, it should have been thrown right out the window. Because for the first time in my long time looking at politics, I'm seeing concrete proof that the people of Ghana do shoot. Although they told you, everybody that know about elections said to people, they said the first thing you got to have right is the list. And you had a whole lot of people running around saying, don't worry, bloat, we got regulatory mechanism. We got enough people on the ground. You can't stop Guyanese with not knowing no ground. They will not mine anything on the ground. You got this on the ground. And this is the result. You're finding all sort of things in various boxes. It's the first time in history that we have actually seen this and see what is happening. I'm not blaming on PVP. I'm saying all of them doing this thing. It's just that they got thrown under the bus, and GCOM should have had a gall. They got out here and said, this is nonsense. Done it here.
That's right.
But not. They come up with some nonsense about, I am not a court of law. Well, she's not a court of law. The lady is a CEO of a company. That's what she is, not judge there. And a CEO of a company had to determine certain things before he makes decisions. She's not a judge when she's sitting there. She's merely a CEO for a government kind company. A court, and I said this gotta be the most ridiculous. Every single international best practice suggests, I put it even on my website, that this GCOM must go and make a decision here. They must go. So that was nonsense, and we're in the same nonsense. We are not a court. We can't do our internal discussion now because we gotta go somewhere, and it's a court. But they can't do internal discussion. But the PVP can set up some commission that nobody knows who the commissioners are, where they come from, no the agreement, anything. On election matters, no single party should be making those decisions by themselves. You can't set up a commission to speak about an election that by yourself, unilaterally, to speak to an election that might throw you out of. It's got to be a joke. But the question is, what are they going to lose by doing it? Nothing. There's no accountability in Guyanese politics. And that is it. They're not accountable to anyone and these governments. And that is where you have to stop.
Mr. Lara, your take on this juicy matter of a government a party that claims that it wasn't robbed, because they say there was an attempt to rob them, they win the government, so story done. But it's the other side That's a wait. You say we attempt, but we showing you that you do more than attempt. And I think that's the elephant in the room that the court, GCOM, the PPP can't deal with. But anyhow, I am the host. You are my guest. Go ahead.
Well, you know, as 2 years later, where the elections are still going on. I mean,
Yes.
the arena is now not GCOM and Ashmin and Atachong Center with ballot boxes. It is the courts.
Yes.
And we've got, who is it, Council Mendez, talking about you take too long. I mean, come on. You're talking about half of the electorate, almost half the electorate, contending that we have been disenfranchised by virtue of where things stand now. Are you telling me we take too long? Huh? And therefore this thing should be thrown out? So I think that first of all, the right this decision was made there. I think, look, going back to March 2nd, you go in a flawed list in this darn thing, you're asking for trouble. That thing should have never taken place with a list that was as bloated as that. It is why I have a problem right now with a sanitized list. We've got to start over from scratch, but sticking with 2020. I have asked some people in the now opposition, I said, look, why was it that the former president allow this thing to go forth? Now, I know there were pressures from all over the place, and the international community was here, etc. Why did he go forth when we had the East Coast thing with ballot boxes? We had, and certainly it wasn't one sided, but it was just, as I like to say, is now who thief more, and who rigged the system more successfully or more convincingly before really the arbiters that ended up saying, hey, look, this is what it is. No, we are still fighting this thing. The PPP wants nothing to do with it. It would like to close that chapter and say we are the winners, and we're going to go after some people, and we can come up with this thing called election reform and electoral reform. We have to get this system out of the way. We've got to get our list totally revamped, totally overhauled. And we have to I would like to get to the bottom of what the opposition has to present before the courts. And all Guyana needs to see that now, to say, here, listen, what really took place with this election? Who really won? Who really won this thing? And would we ever put this to bed? Given this is Guyana, I don't think so. But we are, 2 years later, we are talking about petitions. It's going to go forward now, I think, to the next stage is November 1st. And I wait to see what is going to happen there. Because this, I don't think it's going to end there. The opposition cannot afford to let it end there. So what happens beyond that as we creep forward to 2025? Are we going to get to 2025? I'm already gone to there. Are we going to get there, or is it going to be 2024? Because look, this society cannot continue. You're going to keep a carnival and you're going to keep a circus like the Roman emperors used to do to keep the society distracted and quiet temporarily. But how long are we going to continue when we see day after day all the assaults and the onslaughts that are heaped upon one segment of the people? When you talk about that, you are in the wrong. You are the enemy of the state. You are a troublemaker. So let this thing let it continue before the courts. Let the world see what has taken place here. And I think that the people of Guyana, it's bigger than the opposition, the people of Guyana will get the opportunity to have justice electorally. And I think it is due one way or another, and it's overdue now.
Quickly before we go, gentlemen, this gas to shore pipeline has been on the pages of the daily newspapers and back and forth as to whether it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. The PPP, in particular, former President Jack Dio, it seems hell-bent that he's going forward with it. Where are we going? Henry Jeffrey, you were part of cabinet. You know some of the actors here. Tell us, what does the PPP have to gain from a project that experts are saying may not be a wise undertaking?
Well, you know, David, I'm going to tell you something. It is the structure of decision making, governmental decision making. We're going back to almost the same thing. It's the structure of governmental decision making. All in all, solar might be the best thing for Guyana, if thing. But we got gas, and we can utilize gas. I'm not hearing the vast majority of people saying don't utilize. There are some people saying don't bother with the oil. I mean, in a sense, I mean that's all well and good if you know you are a rich country and so you can make those kind of decisions, or somebody gonna pay you for not bothering with it. But if you're alone, gonna just get up and do. You know, Morales in Morales was in Bolivia, was it?
Bolivia.
Yeah, Morales has said, I don't want to take the oil out the ground. Somebody please pay me for it. I'll keep all the earth. I'm a poor country. I got to build this country. If you don't take it, I'm not going to save the world by keeping my people poor. So I'm not going there. Therefore, I am saying essentially gas is not a bad thing. I think that the opposition, when they were in government, were trying to go here, but it's the nature of decision, the structure of decision making. Most people like you and me and so on, we don't want to get into the nitty gritty, ordinary people of this kind of thing. But we got to have people at the table that we got faith in. If you don't have people at the table that you have faith in, the result would be anybody can come out from any crevice and say, hey, this thing that cost $700,000 in 2018, now it costs 1.3 billion. Hey, this thing is a problem. People start saying, oh Lord, it's the thieves on the other side. They want to steal it. This is what's going to go on. I have, in principle, me, and I think most people, they don't have anything against having this, because if you can bring down your fuel prices 50%, and you need that for your industries and so on. But again, we come to the same thing: is the nature of decision making. The people who are making the decisions, people know the whole thing about corruption and all this and all sort of thing. Therefore, unless you got people there, that's the table matter. You remember we began by saying why you got people on there for the important projects, you say. But I said almost, my thing is almost for any project, you have to got people there that can walk out now and say to that other 40%, listen, this thing is good. Because they have looked at it. They are coming to you. You are not going to convince them that it is good. And so that's my take on this for the most part. I believe that if people say they want a new feasibility study, in the interest of going forward in a sensible way, why not have a new feasibility? But the PPP must go forward. The PPP must demonstrate to the public that it is strong and it can fight the PPPNC and all that. So, and that's where we are going with this. But let me tell you a little joke on our previous question. I went, you remember, I think Village Voice had some numbers they were showing about elections and about how the PVP did numbers. But I'm not bothered with the PP now. I'm saying in 1992, the population was 757,975. And we had a voters list of 48,195. Today, the population has increased 40 thousand votes. Today, the population, 2020, the population was 786,000. 559, about 40,000 votes. Let's see. Yes, they got this roll, the voters increased by 300,000.
Yes.
I mean, regardless how you look at it, it looked like a joke. The voters increased because all sort of people are on there that's not supposed. Some people are dead. No, I mean, it was 661,378, moving from 448, 348,195. You have a 300,000 increase against a 40% in 40,000 increase in the real population. And you tell me that's all right. Let me go along like this. It is a great thing. You leave the door open for anybody to do what they want to do. But that's Guyana.
Yeah,
No.
on the gas to show pipeline.
Look, I want this thing. I want cheap electricity. I suppose all of us do. We want cheap and we want reliable electricity. We have been tortured by the opposite for too long: expensive and unreliable. And we know what unreliable mean. Okay? So I don't think there's any Guyanese in the resident or business that would say we don't want this gas to shore project. But you've got to show us the basis of spending 2 billion US dollars. The PNC started out with one in, was it 2016-17, the coalition, to go to Clonbrook for 700 million US dollars. The thing gone up 300%. It went to a billion, then 1.3, and now we're talking about 2 billion US dollars. Now, the biggest project to date by this country, but the 2 billion is not final. So we're talking about 6 cents per kilowatt and all of that. All these things sounds lovely, but I want to put this against the context of the vice president when he was president and now he's there, and the PPP in general, that which project, capital project they have undertaken, they have initiated, that has been a success. We're not talking about spending 100 million, I think, US dollars to refurbish the Linden, Soosdijk Linden Highway. That thing was built, I think, way back in 90, it's about 50 years old, by B.B. McCormick, if I remember well. And it had lasted decades. That was one of Burnham monumental pieces. So we had an equivalent project under the PPP that has been durable and viable and give the people value for money. The Gas to Shore project, we need somebody like a Dr. Vincent Adams. We don't have these people in any plentiful supply. The one guy that we have here, we run him out of tongue and say he's a PNC man. Excuse me, they say he's a AFC man. Doesn't matter to me. They run this man out of tongue. A man who was number 2 or 3 at the US Department of Energy, ran tens of billions in annual budgets. Exxon didn't want he from there, so they didn't want he here. They're running out of tongue. I mean, the gas plant is going to be built by private people. And the moment you hear about that invitation for expressions of interest, bids, whatever it is, coming out there, you know that the vice president's people's hands are going to be in there, just like those secret investors in the Marriott. And as it ended up in the early stages, his friends at the Berbice Bridge. So you're going to have that. This is tailor made. This is a project that is customized for a lot of big dollar skullduggery to happen here. Gas to shore, you dangle the carrot of cheap and reliable electricity before a energy starved population, and they're ready to jump for it. I am ready for it too, but I got a little bit of a condition, a qualification. Show me the basis. Give us the underpinnings of this thing, the feasibility, the financial feasibility study. What is it that is going? Let us get people who know about it to study this thing when it comes out from a credible source and say, you know what, this thing is good. We want it. We should have it, and I will support it. That's where I am.
DHKLL there on the Gas to Show pipeline. I want to thank you, Gabriel, and thank you, Dr. Jeffrey, for coming through tonight and giving us your insights on these very, very important matters. I'll see you guys back in 2 weeks. Until then, keep your eyes on what's happening in the news. It's really a daily exercise. As soon as you're finished with one piece of news, there's another there, and the country doesn't have the time to really digest in real time. So these programs, I think, help in terms of fleshing out for people and taking their minds back to some of these issues. Again, thank you all so much for coming on, and I will be in touch with you. And to you, the audience, I want to say thank you for making your way onto the program, because of course, CAMS TV was hacked. I think the matter has been sorted out. So tomorrow evening, those of you who normally join us from CAMS, you will be back to your normal platform. But even without CAMS tonight, it was very good to see so many of you out. Loyal viewers, loyal listeners, and loyalty deserves loyalty. And so I thank you all so much. I'll see you all tomorrow night. I think we'll be talking about the Rickford Burke issue, where the government is going after Mr. Burke. I am hoping to get an attorney who's familiar with the matter. And I think I'm having Sharma Solomon out tomorrow night too. So it promises to be a big show. Until tomorrow, I will be